Welcome to MSUA Game Changers webcast, where we speak with satellite and mobile connectivity thought leaders about industry trends and share what you need to know about the future of mobile satellite communications. I'm your host, Roger Lanto, and I'm excited to introduce Symaiya Najarali, a manager at Novaspace who recently moderated a panel on direct-to-device communications at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. Of course, Symaiya's panel was one piece of a four-part series sponsored by Novaspace at CES and touching several sectors in the rapidly growing satellite market. Late last year, Novaspace published the 28th edition of Satellites to be Built and Launched, which projects that more than 43,000 satellites will launch over the next decade, a reality reflected in weekly satellite launches that seem to go unheralded or noticed by most news organizations. Another panel on in-flight connectivity at CES quoted Novaspace projections of connected airplanes growing from 10,000 today to 68,000 by 2034. And yet another CES panel discussed the prospects for connecting cars to satellites. At MSUA, we thought this would be an ideal time to chat with Symaiya regarding the CES 2026 sessions and her impressions of the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead in the satellite sector. First of all, Symaiya, welcome to Game Changers. Tell us a little bit about your responsibilities at Novaspace and your history in the satellite sector.
Thank you, Roger, for having me. So a bit about myself. At Novaspace, I lead market intelligence and consulting studies that are focused on satellite connectivity markets, particularly in the direct-to-device and IoT arena. My role sits at the intersection of research, market assessments, go-to-market strategies, due diligence, helping operators, MNOs, and ecosystem partners really understand where demand is forming and what it takes to scale commercially. I also help shape some of our content partner tracks, like mentioned at CES, where we program with CES and put on a space track to support discussions and conversations in that sector.
I think you were at CES last year, correct?
Yes, that's correct. This has been the third year that I've attended and also moderated the direct-to-device session. So it's been quite a road for me, and it's always fun to see where growth is lying and how companies are advancing compared to where we started off a couple of years ago in this space.
By the way, it was a great panel, and we'll include a link. If you weren't there, you can actually see the recording I believe on this CTA website. So your panel at CES on direct-to-device communications simultaneously highlighted the progress that has been made and the work that has yet to be done regarding deployment and monetization. Several panel members seem to suggest that satellite communications to handsets for voice communications was already a done deal and an existing consumer expectation, table stakes, as we always say. What is your take on the current market status of direct-to-device communications?
Yeah, that's fair, Roger. So my take is really that we've moved away from proof of concept to early commercialization. We saw that in 2025 as Starlink was the first greenfield operator to commercialize services of direct-to-cell connectivity, but we're still seeing an uneven playing field in terms of service by geography. Messaging and emergency is the most established near-term entry points for some of these operators, although broadband and broader services will depend on spectrum access, approvals, and device integration, including partner expectations. So while the service is real today, it is not uniform and it is not fully scalable worldwide.
So how do you compare the different partnerships and the resulting implementations? It seems like there are 3 or 4 different types of implementations, but are they all equivalent or are there significant differences?
Yeah, I'd say they're certainly not all equivalent. Differences are showing up primarily in 3 places when we consider service scope, spectrum, and the regulatory path that's being used, as well as how tightly integrated the service is with the mobile and device ecosystem. So some models are more device-led, others are more MNO-led, and others are pushing a standard first-based approach. So these choices are going to drive differences in terms of timelines, in terms of economics, and ultimately user experience.
Can you name names that fit into each of those categories you just described?
Yeah, so AST Space Mobile, they were also on the panel. They are more MNO led, right? Partnering with over 50 MNOs today. In terms of device-led, so we look at Globalstar also on the panel that took a more proprietary-based approach, partnering with Apple and being active on Apple-related devices, so starting with the iPhones and now moving on to smartwatches as well. When we consider standard-based approach, we're looking at players like Iridium that have, changed their path in terms of the way they want to introduce more direct to unmodified device connectivity and have chosen to, offer their Iridium NTN direct approach using a standard-based approach, which is going to be consistent with 3GPP Rel 19.
So does any single organization have an edge in delivering D2D? Is any company in the lead right now?
Yeah, I would say in terms of determining a single winner, it's tough because the lead really depends on the use case. Some players look strongest on near-term emergency and messaging, others on standards-based scale, and others are pushing more towards broadband and broader bandwidth type experiences. So the market is still early enough that leadership will likely define by who can really operationalize globally and not really who can demo first. Of course, we're seeing Starlink with the greatest traction. They're operating in over 10 countries today and continuously pushing that. We see AST that's promised, broadband type of experiences on mobile devices that are to come and roll out ultimately with their entire service offering. And then we see other operators that are really focused on this SMS text, low power data, pushing into the more IoT domain.
And I don't think it's not a secret, of course, that the satellite operators are overwhelmingly excited at the prospect of having millions of devices connected to satellites. And my impression in the IoT space is virtually anything that's moving, you would want to add satellite connectivity to that, which means module makers and semiconductor makers have to sort of step up their development activities. What's next, and what should we expect in the industry as consumers, as enterprises?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was also spoken about on the panel too. What's next in terms of scaling? Really gaining broader market access and deeper device integration are some of the key pieces in order to have a more repeatable commercial model with MNOs. So we will see increasing pressure to harmonize regulatory approaches because again, uneven permissions currently remain, and that's the main factor for multi-market rollout. But we'll also see more integration between ecosystem players, like you mentioned, trying to get things more standardized and get connectivity into all the devices that are going to be existing in the future.
And what are your thoughts regarding satellite connectivity to cars? When might that happen? What are the gating or enabling factors?
Yeah, so cars are, a natural next step because they already have power, space for antennas, and a clear safety and service use case. Timing will really depend on OEM integration cycles, certification, and how seamlessly we can really get satellite to connect into vehicle connectivity stacks. Some of the enabling factors I would say would be, having more reliable coverage, a consistent user experience, and a commercial model that will work well for both the connectivity provider, but also the automakers.
And what are your thoughts regarding in-flight connectivity? Obviously, there's a lot of excitement and a lot of activity going on in that sector as well. How far along is this revolution from where you look at it, and how is it transforming the in-cabin experience?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Novaspace forecasts that connected aircrafts will exceed about 67,000 by 2034, with airlines increasingly focused on, monetization, bundling, and defining the service tiers that exist today. So IFC is already here. We see more airlines signing agreements, in the coming months. We've just seen Lufthansa sign with Starlink earlier this week. So there really is a shift in terms of more airlines trying to get IFC on board, but also shifting from the type of connectivity that's provided. There's a movement to go away from basic Wi-Fi to a more premium, seamless passenger experience. We also see more NGSO capacity, which is raising the bar on both performance and also on pricing. So, for example, you can now do Teams video calls on airplanes. So there's capabilities that exist beyond what we would have expected, just even a couple of years ago. There are also other airlines that are pitching, the ability to directly log in and video stream, as well as have that user experience that carries forward each time you are a passenger, if that is lumped in with your loyalty program. So we're seeing all kind of unique things really in terms of how they're bundling these service capabilities and really making them available to passengers. And
what's the outlook for satellite connectivity more broadly in 2026? Will we see more battles for spectrum? Will Starlink see more competition? What does it all mean to consumers, governments, corporations? Will we see AI from space?
Yeah, so I mean, I think all of the above. We can certainly expect to see more spectrum and regulatory debate as D2D matures. Also, with the WRC 27 PREP that's accelerating, right? The European regulatory regime that's going to define how regulations and spectrum is divided in a couple of years. We're also going to see more competition for sure around LEO broadband and enterprise and government connectivity, including the continued investment in non-Starlink options like OneWeb and Amazon's new LEO constellation. And then in terms of AI, and this is always the highlight of CES for the past couple of years, we can expect, just with most industries today, an increased usage either directly or indirectly in many systems. But more complex AI systems would still need to rely on more centralized systems.
And where can people obtain the latest Novaspace reports, contact you, or learn more about Novaspace?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of our market intelligence reports, the best starting place is Novaspace's Market Intelligence Hub, where you can find an overview of our reports and extracts, including the recently released Direct-to-Device and IoT Markets Report. We provide free extracts online. You can see the scope of what we're including, and it spans from satellite communication applications to Earth observation and really everything in the space domain. You could also reach out directly to me or through Novaspace on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to point you to the right people, report, and team.
Symaiya, that's fantastic. Thank you for joining us today. So I want to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association for hosting these sessions. You can learn more about the MSUA at msua.org. You can learn how to get our weekly newsletter that gives you updates on everything that's happening in the industry and shares information about upcoming events and Novaspace reports, of course. And you can also find out how to become a member. We look forward to seeing you next time at MSUA's Game Changers webcast. Thank you, Symaiya.
Thanks, Roger.